this room is beautiful. And you can come here and have private tours and private tastings.
Yeah, this is our Julius room, and we host our private tours and tastings in here by our Henschke brand ambassadors. So it's the VIP tour, it goes for 2.5 hours, and it includes a visit to Hill of Grace Vineyard, a tour of the winery, and then a tasting of our, our flagship, most premium wines, which we wouldn't be able to open in Cellar Door because they're such small makes.
Wow, so it's very special to be on that tour. And this room, there's a lot of history in here, isn't it?
It is,
yeah.
There is. It's one of the oldest buildings on the property.
Wow.
So it was built here way back in the 1860s. And when you look at the structure, how they did it, I mean, they're supporting timbers for the roof and what have you. And it's named the Julius room because on the keystone of the door is actually his initials that he carved in over 100 years ago.
And he was the artist as well.
He was a famous sculptor and artist, probably South Australia's most renowned sculptor. He sculpted the War Memorial on North Terrace, which is about 10 metres high with an angel holding a sword from pure white Angaston marble.
Wow, that is impressive. He's a talented man.
Absolutely.
Which is why he has a wine attributed to him.
Yeah, so this is it, the Riesling.
That's the Julius Riesling.
Oh, lovely. Now, what should we be smelling here? What are the aromas?
Lots of citrus. 17 was such an amazing vintage for high natural acidity. So it's winemakers should probably be giving you the tasting notes, but this is one of my favourites, absolutely, because of that sort of lovely tart acidity and beautiful long length. And I guess if you know white wines, we're always looking for purity and length.
And it's from our oldest Riesling vines, so it's actually selected from vines that my father planted back in the 60s, 50 years ago, roughly, which give us that flavour intensity. So it's not just pretty, it has pretty florals and citrus lime characters, but also has minerality and structure and loss of acidity and great length and really sustains the flavour through the palate.
Yes, this is
great seafood wine.
Yeah, cheers, yes. Oh, that is so nice. What is this? There's a little burst at the end. I'm trying to pinpoint the flavour, but there is some delicious stone fruit type burst.
Absolutely, there's sort of like white peach, nectarine, sort of really lovely stone fruit.
Yeah, I can't wait to have
intensity of flavour.
some seafood over summer.
Oysters,
Lovely. Yeah. Thank you, Julius.
Calls for fantastic seafood.
Yes,
absolutely right.
yes. And these are all available at the Cellar Door as well to taste, or just on the tour?
So this lineup of reds here, Hill of Grace, Hill of Roses, is from the nursery vines of Hill of Grace, so a very small block. Mount Edelston and Cyril Henschke are for this tour only. They're made in such tiny quantities. It's really hard to be opening those bottles in Cellar Door. However, these wines we do taste. We have 36 different wines for a medium-sized winery. It's quite a lot of labels, so we're constantly rotating
individual blocks and individual varieties.
Right.
And also some of these are quite historic vineyards.
Yes,
so
yes.
Clearly with 100-year-old vines you don't plant overnight.
Yeah.
So they have a lot of history in it, and they're a limited resource.
Okay,
but
yeah.
very special wines.
So this wine's really a baby compared to some of the others down the end there, isn't it? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Wow, okay.
And then I guess the Wheelwright is a new one that we've just released for our 150th anniversary.
This is the big birthday celebration wine.
Yes. So 2018 is we've celebrated all year.
Nothing's wrong with that.
You only turn 150 once.
Yeah, that's for sure. Wow, wow. Whose idea was it to bring this one out? This was released a little bit early. Is that right?
It was, I guess it was an opportunity waiting to happen. It's vines that my father planted 50 years ago at Eden Valley.
Okay.
So it's made from a 50-year-old Shiraz for its first vintage.
Right.
Effectively. So we were watching the fruit. Sometimes with Henschke, the vineyards have to be patient.
Okay.
Till they get their day in the sun, and
It's a cool
As
area.
we saw our 150th coming, and it wasn't a surprise to us.
Right.
But we did have a wonderful vintage, the 15 vintage, and that was obviously the one to start that wine with.
Yep.
And we've called it the Wheelwright Vineyard, and it will continue on.
And the wheelwright because of?
Because my great-great-grandfather, Johann Christian Henschke, was on his shipping papers when he immigrated to Australia back in 1841. He was a stonemason and wheelwright.
Ah, I see.
And so we like the wheelwright connection. We like that connection with the skill set because these people were amazingly skilled artisans, whole villages of people who settled in South Australia and founded South Australia. And that wheelwright, if you've ever tried to make a buggy wheel, I mean, it's
No, I can't say I have.
is really special, knowledge of timber work.
Yeah.
And the famous Barossa furniture now, the Schedel furniture, the glue pot grates furniture, and what have you,
Right.
are, if you like, now the sort of the history of this sort of skill set.
Right.
And he's also a stonemason, which obviously keys into his grandson, who became the famous sculptor in South Australia.
Yeah.
So, those skills, as well as obviously winemaking and
Yeah, well, it is an art as well.
and all the other farm produce
Yeah.
that comes along the way with Barossa culture.
Yeah. What about yourself? Do you have an artistic flair?
I guess my artistic flair is probably more the winemaking side.
Yeah. Which you've done a very good job at, obviously. Okay, so this one, oh wow. Oh, that's very delicious.
It's Eden Valley Shiraz through and through.
Right. World famous.
Beautiful signatures like sage and black peppercorn, and
Sage.
being slightly higher than the Barossa Valley floor, we get those sort of cooler, sort of I guess wintergreen characters coming through.
And really spicy red blue
Spicy,
fruit
yes,
comes
that's what
up
I'd
through
say.
it. It's very youthful, even though it's already 3 years old, but it has huge potential.
Yeah.
It's also very elegantly structured, so it's and as Justine said, it's very much an Eden Valley style of wine.
Right.
That
So
sort of
the
elegance,
difference with
that
Eden
spice.
Valley and Barossa Valley.
It's a couple of 100 metres in altitude difference.
Right.
And so
Because you're on the edge of the Barossa Valley here, aren't you?
we're in the Eden Valley. So the Eden Valley is a higher country of the Barossa.
Right, okay.
So you have the Barossa Valley and you have the Eden
lovely.
Valley. And what it does, the higher altitude gives you greater day-night temperature differential. So that diurnal temperature shift is really important to hold acidity high and keep the purity of fruit there. So it works for Riesling beautifully, but
Yeah.
also works magnificently for Shiraz. And gives very long aging Shiraz and puts us into a later ripening window. So we have a longer, slower ripening period. And that's how we build the flavours and the structure, the mature tannin.
Oh, that's why you say Henschke wines have to be a bit more patient.
Yeah. Patient in the vineyard, waiting to be recognised, but
Yeah.
also patient in the bottle.
And it pays off?
Yeah,
Patient in the cellar.
Wow, yes. Very nice.
Now, it wouldn't be a Henschke VIP tour and
Oh, yeah.
tasting without trying Mount Edelstone Shiraz. So this is a single vineyard Shiraz, which was first created by my grandfather Cyril Henschke in the 50s, and he was really a pioneer in single vineyard, single varietal table wine.
Okay.
So it's interesting. It was at a time when, if you look at, sort of join the dots together, Cyril was a young man at the time when table wines was just starting to come into the fore again. And it's mostly driven by a lot of the Southern Europeans settling in South Australia
Yes.
after the war.
Yep.
Italians, Greeks, what have you, bringing a new culture of fun food and wine,
Yeah.
demand for wine with their food. And he just happened to be in the right place at the right time and in the right region. This region is much better suited to table wine than fortified wine. And he was a visionary. He saw the potential for single vineyard Rieslings, for single vineyard Shirazes. But he also had some old vine material to work with. So this Mount Edelstone is actually, his first vintage in 1952
Okay.
was from 40-year-old Shiraz vines.
Really?
So the origin of this goes back to the early settlement of South Australia, because it was the Angus family. It was George Fife Angus who founded South Australia. So he formed the South Australian Company. He had sympathy on these persecuted Lutheran Prussians, Silesian, Brandenburgians, whatever you like to call them, but they were German-speaking people who were being persecuted by the Prussian king. George Fife Angus was looking for the right sort of skill set to settle South Australia, and they just happened to come along at the right time. So he helped to fund their trips to South Australia.
Yeah.
And once they were here, they applied their abilities at farming and building and all that sort of thing. And so South Australia really developed.
Yeah.
But what remains is still some of the language, obviously the foods, which are the Barossa traditional foods, are mostly fermented foods, which is interesting. So it's
Which is very trendy right
almost
now.
like the new trendy hippie culture. They were the early hippies. And it's really interesting. I mean, all of that culture has made this unique, I guess, climate of wine and food.
Yeah.
And Cyril just played a really important part of that.
Wow.
And that particular vineyard was planted by a great-grandson of George Fife Angus, Ronald, who studied at Oxford University. And when he got back in 1912, and we're going back a bit, before the First World War, he planted this vineyard.
Wow.
And it was on the eastern slope of Mount Edelstone. So Edelstone comes from Edelstein, which means gemstones. It was named by a German mineralogist back in the early days. And that fruit was sold to big wineries until his son Colin offered it to my father in 1952.
I see.
And that's where the first Mount Edelstone single vineyard Shiraz came from. By 1956, he'd won first prizes all over Australia with that wine, and suddenly he became a household name. And people were charging up to the winery to fill up their F.J. Holden's, cartons of my father's wines and struggle off out the driveway.
Yeah, wow. So there's a lot of history in, well, all of these bottles really.
Yeah.
But,
so we've made
interesting
this now
stories.
for over 60 vintages.
Wow.
And the vines are over 100 years old now,
Yeah.
so they're centenarians.
Well, I think I better taste it then.
So probably the oldest single vineyard wine that's been made in Australia. So this
This one?
encapsulates really Australian wine history.
Wow, okay.
So to your health.
I'm already starting here.
Or as we would say, ein Prosit.
How do we say that?
Ein Prosit.
Ein Prosit.
Yeah.
Prost.
Prost.
Prost. Oh, yes, I have them. I know all the cheers in every language.
So that really typifies Eden Valley.
Okay.
That is that very spicy, lots of sage and black pepper, black and blue
yes.
fruits, quite layered, quite textural, but still elegant.
Oh, that
and
would
still
be
with huge aging potential.
Dinner on a cold day, I can imagine. A nice lamb or something.
Well,
Yeah.
this and locally grown Huttonville lamb is the perfect combination.
Yeah. Oh, that is fantastic.
In fact, the lambs tend to graze in the vineyard, and then they're a nice combination for later on.
Oh, you have lambs here on site?
We have our own sheep.
I see. And they help with the I don't know how to put this correctly, but do they help with
Managing the weeds during the winter
the
time.
weeds? I see.
Yeah, and the grass and what have
Okay.
you. So
Lawnmowers.
definitely. And so our neighbours as well.
The lambs.
They have sheep. The Angus family still
Right.
run the farm, and they graze their sheep in the vineyard, in the Littleton vineyard.
So I guess
Nice
we're just
connection.
going
Yeah.
from south to north
Okay.
in terms of Eden Valley, and we're getting slightly warmer. And this is, the difference is pretty minute, but it is a really interesting tasting to see the Wheelwright, which is slightly higher altitude,
Yes.
slightly cooler, and then going north to Mount Edelstone Vineyard and then to Hill of Grace Vineyard, which is then slightly warmer again. Still by Eden Valley standards though. And so I guess Hill of Grace, we see a lot more 5-spice and sort of more exotic spices as you go sort of north with the Eden Valley.
Yeah.
So a nice little lineup of single vineyard Shiraz wines to try.
Lovely.
So it shows you that difference in sense of place from south to north within the region.
I didn't realise it was that diverse, really.
Yeah.
And I didn't realise we were that high.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, you're up in the clouds here.
Yeah.
It's a cool drizzly day. So that's the reason.
It's still beautiful.
But this does show, the Hill of Grace vineyard does show that difference in as Justine explained, in the site. But so that you get that sense of place. But it's also on a deep silt, so a little creek runs through the middle of the vineyard. Okay. So it's on a deep silt and brings up that lovely exotic spicy character.
Right.
But being the warmest of the three vineyards, it also has a sort of richer, perhaps a slightly more mysterious depth to the wine.
Oh, I like that description.
And just really lovely layers of flavour and texture.
So this is the 13 which we released at the beginning of September, and we're almost sold out of it now. This has been a really small vintage.
Oh, really?
And the 14 will be another very small vintage, but we'll be looking to release the 14 in May 2019.
Okay, so the ticking down of the clock begins. Oh.
And the 12 was the recipient of Halliday Wine of the Year, so that was a nice nice larger vintage for a single vineyard wine like Hill of Grace to have, and then to go to very, two small, very small vintages that aren't lasting us very long. Once we get back to the 15, we'll be back to our sort of our normal size of Hill of Grace. So I guess that's the thing with single vineyard wines is that you're so affected by the season, and the wine that's in the bottle is a really true representation of that site in that season. And we can't find any more fruit from anywhere else to bulk up the volumes. That it is what it is. And I think that's what's so nice about it as well.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. Why are they so much smaller? What happened in that year that led to that?
It is a true single vineyard wine, and so that vineyard really reflects the seasons.
Yep.
So if you have a drought year, which it was in 2013, the yields are suppressed. If you have a year like 14 where you have very poor set and frost, then you end up with tiny yields as well.
Right.
So you end up with, in this case, 30% of what the 12 was, for example, and in 14, 25% of what the 12 was. So you have that variation. But it's also really interesting because you get a snapshot, if you like, of what the seasons were like. Yeah. So you can taste through the vintages, and from the flavours you can say what happened in those vintages, and you can recognise them.
It's great recognition, isn't it? Ooh, that was rainy that year.
Yeah, which is actually what we did with our 50 years of Hill of Grace celebration, looking at every single vintage that we made, and we'd only not made 3 or 4 because of the poor conditions of the year.
Season conditions.
But you could see the different winemaking styles as the winemaking changed hands, but also
the
being
influence
able
of the
to,
season.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
That's so interesting.
And this has a really amazing story because it's called Hill of Grace. And when we take people out there, they expect to see the vineyard on the hill. Very Australian. It's the opposite. It's in a little valley.
Right.
The name comes from the church, from the chapel.
I was going to ask, where does the name come from?
So it comes from a German name that was given to the church, a region that some of the settlers came from, called Gnadenberg. Right. And Gnadenberg is 2 words, effectively. Gnaden means grace and Berg means hill.
I see.
So that's the origin of the name.
Okay.
It's a really pretty stone church built in 1860.
Beautiful.
And so it recognises that history of our pioneers and our ancestors. But it also recognises the culture. You think of a church, you think of the weddings and the christenings and all those sorts of celebrations, and kids laughing and playing games outside and what have you. The music, the trumpets, like the old euphoniums being played in the church, along with the pedal organ, and there's all of that sort of lovely culture and the food and the trading tables that go with the women who bring along their goodies from home that they've baked. is all a part of that life.
Yes, you're painting a beautiful picture.
Yeah, so this wine is more than just a
Yeah.
wine with a name. This is a
Yes.
wine with a true history that goes
Yeah.
back over 150 years. I mean, the original vines, the
Wow.
grandfathers were planted
This is the one
somewhere around 1860, maybe even
Right.
earlier, by an ancestor of mine on my grandmother's side.
Wow, there's just so many layers, in each of these bottles. And
There is.
it's fantastic hearing these stories. I love being here. It's a beautiful setting. And tink you very much for having me. Thank you very much.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for joining us, Sally.